just a minute. It's painful, I know. And I want you to think about your best friend in middle school. I want you to get their image in your mind. Best friend in middle school. And then I want you, and you got them in your mind? I mean, that crazy, ridiculous person. You don't know where they are anymore. They disappeared, but in middle school, they were like we didn't have best friends forever back then, but you know what I'm talking about. So you got them in your mind? Now I want you to imagine that they are in charge of this entire event. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, no. Not my best friend from middle school. Well, my best friend from middle school and high school and through college is in charge of this entire event. Now, here's my point. And if you zone out or get tired, I know you've been up late, I just want you to hear this one part. You have no idea of what God might use you to accomplish in this world. You have absolutely no idea of what God may want to use you to accomplish in the world. And regardless of how much or how little potential you think you have, here's what I know for sure. You have no idea of what God may want to do through you in your community, in your city, in the world. You don't know. My best friend from middle school launched this whole movement. And I can assure you that if you had sat down with a lady named Mary Gillerstedt, in fact, I dedicated my book to Mary. She's 80-something years old. She was our youth director. We didn't have youth pastors. She was a woman. They weren't going to let her be a pastor anyway, okay? Back in those days. We were Baptists, okay? We didn't pay women right. We didn't honor them, but they did all the work. Still the truth in most churches today. Mary Gillerstedt was our youth pastor, youth leader. And if you'd sat her down and said, one day, you see those two guys over there, the ones that are always disrupting, always late, always making a party out of everything, whether it should be or not. The ones that are always disruptive, the ones that are disrespectful, the ones that tear up other people's property. You see those two guys? The one on the left, the cuter one, that one? One day, he's going to launch a movement. And it's going to impact college students all over the world. And she would have said, I don't think so. And here's my point. You have no idea what God may want to use you to accomplish in the world. And here's why I'm here today, other than the fact that Louis invited me and told me I could talk about anything I want to. I don't want you to miss it. I don't want you to miss it. I sat in the very, very back last night and listened to Francis and it was totally engaged in his talk, totally engaged in the worship, and I looked around and I thought, if only they could be my age and Louis' age for 5 minutes and look at them and see them the way we see them, to see you the way we see you, it would so drastically impact the way you see yourself and your potential. You have no idea what God could and would do through you to impact the world. But I don't want you to miss it. And most people miss it. And nobody plans to miss it. But most people miss it. See, here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about one tiny, tiny, tiny little slice of life that's so little and so minuscule that when I tell you what I want to talk about, you may just think, oh, why are we even talking about this? But if you'll just trust me and Louis to be the old guys for just a minute and to look back on our lives and look forward into your lives and just to give you some sort of older guy advice, there's a slice of your life, there's a piece of your life that you don't pay very much attention to because nobody wants to pay very much attention to it, especially when they're in their 20s. But this little slice of life, this little dynamic, has the potential to determine, not influence, determine the direction and the quality of your life. It's so powerful, it will overpower your prayers. It has the potential to overpower your worship. I guarantee you it has the potential to overpower your commitment to Christ. It has the potential to overpower everything. It has the potential to determine, not simply influence, determine the direction and the quality of your life. It is the thing that shipwrecks and sidelines more individuals than anything else in the world. And you will either rule it or it will rule you. And because the Holy Spirit lives inside of you, you have the potential to rule it and not allow it to rule you. I want to talk to you for just a few minutes today about your appetites. Your appetites. Now, bottom line, your appetites will either be ruled by you or they will rule you. And I can say this with some authority because of age. You have no idea, and it's not because you're not smart, it's just because you're in your 20s. You have no idea just how powerful your appetites really are. But let me give you a couple of illustrations. Your parents are where they are based on how well they manage their appetites. Some of you were abandoned as kids because you had a mom or a dad who had more of an appetite for alcohol or pills or someone other than your mom or your dad, and they left you. And as a kid, you couldn't understand that. Why can't you just love me? Why would my parents divorce? Why would they split? And you look back and you see that your mom or your dad or perhaps both chased something that was more important to them than you. And it's painful. It'll be painful for the rest of your life. That's the power of an appetite. Why would a parent abandon a child in the United States of America? Some of you, your deepest pain is not because of your appetite, but it's because of the way somebody else managed an appetite. That's how powerful they are. Here's something else that's interesting, and this is just for a few of you. Wasn't it interesting last night? Francis was amazing. I've heard Francis a lot. Last night was like Francis like on steroids. It was so powerful. Maybe it was just me, but I just needed to hear that. The worship was so great. And then you went to late night, and that was so great. And you were like on the, if you can use the term spiritual high, I mean, you're just like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And wasn't it interesting? Don't raise your hand. When you walked out of the arena and you headed back to your hotel room or you headed back to wherever you were going, wasn't it interesting that in spite of all that content and all that music and all that passion and all that preaching and all that Jesus, that for some of you an appetite crept back in, didn't it? To eat things you shouldn't eat, to drink things you shouldn't drink, to watch things you shouldn't watch, to do things you shouldn't do. How can that be? How could you leave a room in a dynamic like this and go back to a hotel room or to go off with your friends? Some of you are here with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you're couples, and you're kind of struggling because you're physically attracted. You're supposed to struggle. That's healthy. That's fine. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But all of a sudden, in spite of all that, you found yourself kind of going in a direction that you sort of talked about before. We're not going to do that. We're not going to go in that direction. And there it was again. And you're thinking, how can that be? It seems like the momentum of worship and the momentum of Bible study and the momentum of Beth Moore and the momentum of Louis and the momentum of passion should be so powerful, it should override those appetites. There they were. That's the power of an appetite. And it will rule you or you will rule it. They will rule you or you will rule them. Let me just say it this way. Then we're going to jump into the scripture in just a minute. I don't know of any Christian leader who lost their influence because of their theology. I don't know any Christian leader, a person who has had an influence, who lost their influence because of where they did or didn't go to school. I don't know of any Christian leaders that had influence that had their leadership or their influence because of their grade point average. I don't know of any Christian leader who lost their influence because they lost their zeal for Jesus. But I could stand up here for a long time and tell you stories about influential Christian leaders that lost their influence and lost their platform and lost their testimony because they were ruled by an appetite. They will rule you or you will rule them. Your response to your appetites, students who I love, will determine the direction and the quality of your life. And they will always be a factor in everything that you deal with. Now let's talk about a specific. When we think about appetites, we immediately think about food, right? But there's more than that, right? There's several appetites. There's lots of appetites. There's food and there's sex. There's a lot of them. There's food. There's basically two appetites. There's food, and I'm just kidding. Okay, there's a bunch of appetites. Let's look, here's a list for a second. Did you know, and here's the thing. These are things that will all will impact you at different levels and at different stages of life. Did you know there's an appetite for progress? Progress, I want to do better in school. I want to get a graduate degree, an appetite for progress. An appetite for responsibility. When you get your first job or your second job, you're going to want more responsibility and more responsibility. There's an appetite for respect. We all want to be respected. There's an appetite to win. There's an appetite to be loved. There's an appetite to be accepted. Did you know that you are all acceptance magnets? That you are drawn to environments of acceptance and you are repelled by environments of rejection. God made you that way. That's an appetite. There's an appetite for fame, right? I mean, there's something in most of you, you don't want to talk about it, but you like to be famous. If you could push a magic button and be famous, hey, I'd like to be famous. That's an appetite. There's an appetite for recognition. You want people to know what you've done and how well you've done. You know, mom, watch this. Mom, watch this. Remember when you were a kid? Dad, look at this. Dad, look at this. Mom, watch this. Dad, look at this. What is that? That's just this, you want to be recognized. There's an appetite, check this out, to be envied. Guys, is it there? There's an appetite to be envied. We want people to look at us and who we're with and go, dude, why is she with you, right? We want people to look at what we drive. There's an appetite simply to be envied, for people to look at us and say, I want to be him, I want to be her. There's an appetite for stuff. It's why we have more than we need. It's why you've had several versions of the iPod. You've had several laptops. We just can't get enough stuff. All of these are appetites. And the good news and the bad news is they're never, ever, ever, ever going away. You don't pray them away. You don't live them away. You don't spiritualize them away. They're never going away. Now, 3 things you need to know about appetites. Number 1, God created them and sin distorted them. God created them, sin distorted them. This is where the Buddhists have it a little bit wrong. God created appetites. God, in fact, in the book of Genesis, God said, I'm going to give you all the plants and all the fruit of all the trees to eat. God created the appetite. And he said, then Adam, you shouldn't be alone. You need companionship. God created the appetite for companionship. That all of those appetites I just listed and all the appetites you experience in life, God created them. The appetite for progress, you serve an extraordinarily creative God. The appetite to create is an appetite from God. The appetite for progress, God loved progress. Read the Old Testament. All those appetites God gave you, but sin distorted them. Every single appetite you have has been broken and distorted by sin. They aren't bad. They're just broken. Second thing you need to know about appetites, and in fact, if you're not going to hear anything else this point forward, if you just hang on to this one idea, it'll serve you throughout the rest of your life. Appetites are never fully and finally satisfied. Appetites are never fully and finally satisfied. Would you just say that with me? Appetites are never fully and finally. Now you know this because you've sat down at a meal and you've eaten until you thought you were going to throw up. And you said, I can't eat another thing. And 3 hours later, you're at the refrigerator looking for something else to eat, right? Why? Because appetites are never fully and finally satisfied. Now, we know that when it comes to food, the same is true of sex. The same is true of acceptance. The same is true of progress. The same is true of creativity. There is no appetite that is ever fully and finally satisfied. And the lie that you will be tempted to believe for the rest of your life is that there's somebody out there that can fully and finally satisfy an appetite. There's something out there that can fully and finally satisfy an appetite. There's some recognition out there that can fully and finally satisfy an appetite. But you need to know for the rest of your life, the way appetites are designed, they are never, ever fully and finally satisfied. There aren't enough touchdowns. There's not enough kisses. There aren't enough awards. There aren't enough cars. There aren't enough shoes. Appetites are never fully and finally satisfied. You never go, oh, I'm done. I'm done. Never, ever, ever. God designed them that way. Third thing, your appetites always whisper now and never later. Appetites always whisper now and never later. Appetites always say, trade the ultimate for the immediate. Trade the ultimate for the immediate. That's what your appetites whisper to you the rest of your life. And you can't pray it away. You can't study it away. You can't scripture memorize it away. You can't worship it away. This is the way it is. God gave them to us. Sin broke them. And if you don't rule them, they rule you. And here's the tragedy from my perspective. As I look into these 2 amazing auditoriums full of all of you incredible students. Your response to your appetites will determine whether or not you fulfill God's will for your life. Your response to your appetites determines whether or not you will fully embrace God's potential for you, to whether you are there to discover what God could have done, would have done through you. Had you been that person who learned to harness and keep in control these wonderful things that God has given us that sin has broken, that will never, ever go away. Now today, real quickly, I want to tell you a story from the Old Testament. It's found in Genesis chapter 25. And if you want to follow along, fine. We're going to put the verses right up here on the screen if you don't want to do that. It's a very familiar story. In fact, you may not have heard this story since you were a kid in Sunday school. It's the story of two brothers, Jacob and Esau. And in this story, I think we discover a powerful, powerful principle for understanding the power of our appetites, and a powerful principle that we can take with us for the rest of our lives to help us harness them and keep them in check and keep them from controlling us. Now, the story of Jacob and Esau, they're two brothers, right? They were twins, but they were very different. Esau was the warrior, hunter, outdoorsman. You remember this from Sunday school, perhaps? He was the man's man. He was the guy. He was loud. He was obnoxious. He could, wrestle bears and alligators. He was just like the ultimate guy, you know. Jacob, on the other hand, was a mama's boy. Jacob loved to cook. Jacob did not like to perspire. Jacob did not like to go outside. Jacob was creative. Jacob liked to decorate. Jacob just didn't want to have anything to do with the outside because after all, it was outside. Esau didn't want to go inside because after all, that's inside. They were very, very, very different. But Esau was the oldest. Even though they were born almost exactly at the same moment, Esau was born first. And that's what brings tension to this story. Now, there's another part of this story that we don't relate to very much because it's not part of our culture. And the centerpiece of this story, as you may know, is the idea of a birthright. So let me explain that to you. We don't do this now. The birthright was something that was granted to the oldest son in a family. No matter what the son was like, the oldest, the firstborn son, got the birthright. And with the birthright came three very, very, very important things. First of all, if you had the birthright, you got a double portion of the inheritance, which meant you got at least twice as much inheritance than your brothers or sisters. That you were gonna be the richest of the kids. And if you came from a wealthy family like Jacob and Esau did, that was a whole lot of wealth. And more importantly to you, it was a whole lot more wealth than your younger brothers or sisters were going to inherit. So there was a financial benefit to having the birthright. The other thing that came with the birthright was this, and this was pretty cool, is that you got to be the judge of the family. That once your parents died, if there was ever any disagreement between brothers and sisters, you got to be the judge. It wasn't a democracy. You didn't vote. You got your brothers and sisters together, you heard their case, and as the oldest son, you went, here's what we're gonna do, here's what we're not gonna do, and there was no dispute. You were the judge of the family. So with the birthright came power. And then in some strange mystical sense that we don't understand, in the Old Testament, there was a sense of blessing that came with the birthright. That if you had the birthright, there was a sense in which God was gonna bless you and bless your family in some kind of multi-generational way that nobody completely understood, but they knew this was part of the birthright. And so in the middle of this story is this desire of the younger brother to have the birthright and to take it from an older brother. But that was absolutely impossible because it was given to a brother or given to a son at birth. And yet that sets up the tension and the drama in this story. Here's the story. You maybe remember this from childhood. Once, when Jacob was cooking, because that's what he did. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau, older brother, came in from the open country, famished. There's your appetite. And he said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of the red stew. I'm famished. Now pause for just a moment. I didn't have a brother growing up. I just had a sister, I had a younger sister. I never understood this story until I had my own kids. In fact, I have three kids, Andrew, Garrett, and Allie. I have two sons, Andrew and Garrett. In fact, Andrew, my older son, he's a senior in high school. He's here somewhere in the audience, somewhere listening. Somewhere over there, I guess. Yeah, he's the cute one. Yeah, looks like his mom, fortunately. Anyway, I think that we have a picture. Don't we have a picture? Let me pull up the picture. Yeah, here they are. This is Andrew. He's over there somewhere, right? This is Garrett, senior in high school, junior in high school, 18, 16. Older brother, younger brother. Now, raising these two boys, I finally get the Jacob and Esau thing. And if you're a guy and you have a younger or your older brother, you get this. If you're ladies, if you have an older, younger sister, you totally get this. Here's the thing. In families, the older brother never needs anything from the younger brother, ever. In fact, the older brother oftentimes wished the younger brother would go live somewhere else, right? In some cases, the older brother sees the younger brother as kind of a gnat, because the younger brother always wants to wear the older brother's clothes, or the younger sister wants to wear the older sister's clothes, wants to be with their friends, wants the same curfew, wants to. The older brother never needs anything from the younger brother. The younger brother's always wanting something from the older brother. Isn't that right? But every once in a while, and it is so rare, every once in a while, just every once in a while, the older brother needs something from the younger brother. Now, this is such a rare occasion that smart younger brothers pause and they relish the moment. He needs me. She needs me. And see, smart younger brothers and smart younger sisters, when the older brother or older sister say, hey, can I borrow, is it okay? They wait and they realize this is a major moment of negotiation. So when older brother has to ask younger brother for something, guess what younger brother does? Younger brother thinks, okay, what is the most valuable thing older brother has? Let's start with that. So your older brother asks younger brother, and younger brother says, okay, I'll do that if you let me drive your truck. No. Okay, if we swap rooms. No. How about a chest bump? I mean, just anything. It's like, let's work our way down, because younger brother knows these moments are rare. So older brother needs me. So if I'm going to get anything, I got to start with what's most valuable and work my way down. So older brother Esau comes to Jacob and he says, I'm famished, I'm starving, I want some of that stew. And younger brother Jacob goes, okay, this is a rare moment in time. What can I trade for this stew? Let's start with the most valuable thing. I'll take your birthright. I'll take your birthright. Here's what the next verse says. Jacob replied, first, before I give you the stew, first, sell me your birthright. Now, this is where the story gets really strange. Because from our perspective, we have to ask the question, who in their right mind would trade their birthright for a bowl of stew? Who would do that? Who would trade future wealth, future power, and future blessing for something as temporary as a bowl of stew? Who would do that? And the answer to the question is, you might. The answer to the question is, some of you actually are right now. The answer to the question is, as a pastor, I see people do it all the time. The answer to the question is, some of your parents did this. You look back, they traded a relationship with you. They traded a relationship with you for a pill, for a bottle, for a habit, for some other chick, for some other lady, and they're not even with that woman anymore, and your relationship with your dad or your mom will never be what it could be. They traded years of being at ball games. They traded years of being at recitals. They traded years of relationship with you for something that's not even there anymore. Who would trade their birthright for a bowl of stew? I'm telling you, people do it all the time. I don't want you to do it, because you have no idea what God might use you to accomplish in this world if you'll learn to harness your appetites and allow, instead of your appetites controlling and ruling you. The story goes on. Look, this is Esau. Look, this is huge. Look, I'm about to die. Okay, wait. Die? You walked in here under your own power. I'm about to die. I gotta have that. I gotta have her. I gotta drive that. I gotta wear that. I need new shoes. I gotta, right? I mean, we've all been there. And as a parent, it's the biggest thing in the world. I'm about to die. What good? Now listen to how this goes. What good is the birthright to me? It's worth a lot, but in the moment somehow, Esau loses sight of how valuable the birthright is. Now, this is an interesting thing. Psychologists have studied the impact and have studied this whole issue of appetites for a long, long, long time. All this information is available. This is easy to find. And psychologists tell us, and maybe some of you know this, maybe some of you are studying this, that when any one of your appetites gets exaggerated, when one of your appetites gets stimulated, did you know things actually change and happen in your brain? That there's actually a change that happens in your brain, whether it's hunger or sex or appetite for stuff or power or recognition or fame or envy, whatever it is. When you get locked in on something and one of your appetites is enraged and jacked up, something actually happens in your brain. One of the things that happens is a thing called impact bias. All of us have experienced this. Impact bias takes a simple appetite and magnifies it out of proportion. This has happened to all of us. This is what happens every time you go shopping. People who market, they understand impact bias. Impact bias tricks your brain, and here's what impact bias tells your brain. It tells your brain, this thing or this person or this experience is going to be extraordinarily satisfying. It exaggerates the satisfaction that you'll receive if you buy it, ask her out, do whatever, go wherever, experience whatever. Impact, when you get locked in on something, your brain lies to you. Impact bias, it just focuses you in, and it tells you it's going to be better than you ever thought it would be. This is why you have buyer's remorse. You're in the mall, you're shopping for a car, you're wherever, you think, I gotta have it, you're at the Apple store, you're wherever, and it's like, oh, I gotta have it. And then you get it, and you get it home, and about 2 weeks later, you're looking at it, and the credit card comes in, and you're like, bill comes in, and you're like, why did I do this? I'll tell you why. Impact bias. It was presented in such a way that you thought, wow, and your brain said, it's gonna be awesome, and then it was just okay. Impact bias. The other thing that happens in your brain, this is kind of interesting, it's called focalism. Now, we've all experienced this. You just go back to your first major, over-the-top high school crush, focalism. Focalism focuses our minds on one thing and blurs out everything else. You've seen this illustrated in movies, older movies, kind of B movies. And this is why you would sit in class in high school. Remember this? And there she was, guys. And she was about 3 rows up. You can still picture her. 3 rows up over to the left. And it's like everything totally blurred out except her. I mean, the teacher calls on you, what, huh? You know, everybody's leaving the classroom. It's like, what? And it's like, in your brain has the ability. Your brain has the ability to put everything else around you out of focus and focus you specifically on one item, one thing, one person, one thought, one experience. Your brain changes when an appetite is inflamed. This happens to all of us. You've all experienced this. We've all experienced it. Can you see how dangerous this is? Can you see why you could walk out of a night last night, and walk right out onto the street and suddenly appetites just start surfacing. You're thinking, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. That's the power and the danger and the potential of your appetites. They have the potential to determine the direction of your life. So here's Esau. I mean, his appetite for food is enraged, it's inflamed. Focalism, impact bias. And here's what he says. But Jacob said, swear to me. Jacob said, swear to me first. So he, Esau, swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Now, this is the part where I wish I could hit pause on the story. And if I could hit pause on the story, I would like to show up in the story. So allow me to role play what I would like to say to Esau at this point in the story. I would like to magically appear right before he says, okay, I'll trade my birthright for a bowl of stew. And I would say, Esau, wait, time out. Don't ask me who I am. I know it's weird, but I'm jumping in your story. I just, before you do this, okay, come here, Esau. Before you do this, I gotta tell you something. Okay, now look, this is gonna be odd, but just give me a minute. Esau, I'm from the future. Thus the strange clothing. Esau, listen. You're gonna have 12 sons. Each one of these sons is gonna have a family. A few years from then, this whole family is gonna end, and you gotta trust me on this whole family of yours, all 12 sons in their family, they're gonna end up in Egypt. And they're gonna become a nation of slaves. And they're gonna be in slavery for 400 years. And they're gonna become a mighty, mighty nation. And they're gonna be God's chosen people. And they're all gonna be a part of your lineage. This entire, Esau, focus. This entire nation of people is gonna come from your body. And they're gonna be God's people. And they're gonna be a nation of slaves. And then after 400 years, God is gonna raise up a guy. I know this is an odd name. His name is Moses. God's gonna raise up a deliverer named Moses. And Moses isn't gonna know God's name. In fact, this whole nation that's gonna come from you, they're not gonna know God's name. And Moses is gonna be a shepherd. I'm skipping a lot, Esau. You can read it later. But he's gonna become a shepherd. Esau, wait, Esau. And God is gonna introduce himself. God is gonna introduce himself to this guy that's related to you named Moses. And Esau, listen to how the God of the universe, the creator of heavens and earth, listen to how God introduces himself to Moses. Listen to this, Esau. Before we take that stew, listen, this is what God's gonna say. He's gonna say, Moses, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. God is gonna introduce himself with your name. Unless you trade your birthright for a bowl of stew. Esau, but one more story, quick. 2,000 years from this moment, Esau, 2,000 years from this moment, God, through your lineage, is gonna send his son into the world to save not just your family and not just the nation that'll be called Israel, to save the entire world. Everybody on the planet has the potential to have eternal life through his son, and he's gonna come through you. And there's gonna be one of his followers named Matthew. Trust me, he's gonna be a tax gatherer. I can't explain that. It's gonna be way too far in the future. Matthew, the tax gatherer, is gonna write the story of just a man named Jesus. It's gonna be a best-selling book. I know you don't know what a book is. Hang on with me. He's gonna write, it's not even really a book. They're just gonna call it a book. It's gonna be called the Book of Matthew. And when he introduces the greatest story that will ever be told in the history of stories, here's how he's gonna start his book. Abraham begat Isaac, who begat Esau. And from Esau came the Messiah, the Son of God. Now, Esau, I know you're hungry. Do you want to trade all that for a bowl of stew? Because if you do, God will introduce himself to Moses as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and your little brother Jacob. And Matthew will introduce the Savior as the grandson, Jacob, who was grandson of Abraham. And I don't know, because I never met these guys. I think in that moment, other than the fact that I appeared from the future, and that would be shocking, I think just the knowledge of what God would have and could have done through Esau would have stopped him in his tracks. But I wasn't there to help him think through his future. And my friends, nobody's gonna be there to help you either. You're like Esau. You have no idea what God might do through you if you will surrender your appetites to him and live for him fully. You have no idea. In other words, you have no idea what hangs in the balance of your willingness to refuse to trade your future for a bowl of stew. Story continues. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. And he ate, watch this part. Students, I'm telling you, this is your future if you're not careful. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. He ate and he drank, and the stew was gone, and so was the birthright. And his destiny was changed because of an appetite that he couldn't harness. Do you know how important this is in your life right now? This is a tension that never, ever goes away. If you think, well, once I'm 30, well, once I'm 40, once you're dead, this won't be a tension anymore. But until then, every single day of your life, students, every single day of your life, you will be tempted to trade your future for some bowl of stew. And in the story, I think we get the big picture in terms of how to address this. Do you know how you have to address this through the rest of your life? It's called reframing. Would you say that word with me? Reframing. One more time. You know what it is? It's looking at that bowl of stew. It's a relationship. It's a shortcut in school. It's a, well, I don't need to really try as hard there. It's a, you know what, nobody else is gonna know. Everybody else is doing it, whatever it is. It's looking at that bowl of stew and stepping back and say, wait a minute. In light of my future, in light of my life, in light of what God might do through me, in light of what I'd love to see God do through me, is it really worth trading my future for this? Is it worth trading the ultimate for the immediate? It's reframing. In fact, I think one of the best exercises you could begin today is to get a piece of paper out of your journal or a notebook or borrow paper from somebody at some point and write this across the top. 5 years from now, just 5 years from now, ... And throughout the day and every night for the next few nights and every morning for the next few mornings, just write whatever comes to mind. 5 years from now, here's where I want to be, God. 5 years here from now, here's where I want to be academically. 5 years from now, here's where I want to be spiritually. 5 years from now, here's where I want to be in my relationships. 5 years from now, here's where I want to be in terms of this habit, in terms of this addiction. 5 years from now, and to begin to put on paper your vision and your picture of your preferred future, because it's only in measuring your current temptation against your preferred future that you'll have the perspective you need that Esau lacked to move forward and harness your appetites. Because your appetite only knows one word, it's more, and your appetite only has one little spot on the clock, and it's now. And by reframing, stepping back and asking the question, wait a minute, what's at stake? What's at stake? What's at stake? And the answer to the question, what's at stake, is you don't know, you don't want to risk it because you have no idea what God might do through you, what God could do through you. And you want to be there for it. So let me ask you, what's your bowl of stew right now? What's your bowl of stew right now? Is it a habit? What's your bowl of stew right now? Is it a shortcut you're taking? What's your bowl of stew right now? You have an incredible IQ, and you're just kind of cruising. You're not applying yourself. What's your bowl of stew right now? What is it that you're involved in? It's not illegal and it's not immoral, but you wouldn't want anybody to know about it. What's your bowl of stew right now? What are you trading right now for your preferred future, for what might be God's incredible intentional will for your life? For some of you, come on, it's a relationship. This is that stage of life where it gets relational real quick. Your girlfriend wouldn't come to passion because she's not really into this. Your boyfriend wouldn't come to passion. He's not really into this. He's watching online. You hope. You don't know. And you're just dragging him along, or you're dragging her along. Come on. And you know in your heart, if you were to say, God, is he or is she your will for my life? You already know the answer to that. You're trading your future for someone that God loves and Jesus died for, but who is not right for you now. And he or she, it's got to go. Some of you have a habit You don't want to call it an addiction because that sounds so adultish. It's not really an addiction. It's just a habit, and it's kind of a pastime, and it's just an entertainment thing, and it's not a big deal, and you can control it. You can quit anytime you want to, but you know in your heart, if you were ever to say, God, I want your future for my life. I want your preferred future. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to be Esau. I don't want to take a shortcut. You know that God would instantly put his finger right there on that. That's your bowl of stew. And you're trading the unknown will of God for something. Listen, it's going to be gone. It's going to be gone. He's going to be gone. She's going to be gone. That entertainment's going to be gone. That thing's going to be gone. That event's going to be gone. One day it's just going to be gone. And with it, perhaps your potential. With it, perhaps your future. You don't know what's at stake, and you're too young to risk it. So I want to leave you with 2 words. Reframe. 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 I'm so locked in, bias impact, focalism, just so locked in. It's hard to get my mind off. I'm going to step back and say, okay, I'm reframing all of my temptation in light of my future desires, in light of what God has, in light of the kind of relationships I want to have, in light of where I want to be financially, in light of where I want to be spiritually, academically. Reframing. I'm not trading all of that for a bowl of stew. Reframe. 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 Someday, some of you will lead this movement. Someday, some of you will lead the leading churches in the United States of America. Someday, some of you will lead the major missions impetus around the world. Don't miss that. Don't miss that. Don't trade your future for a bowl of stew. Thanks very much for allowing me to be here with you this morning.